So good evening, distinguished participants. My name is Jamelia Jackson, and on behalf of my colleagues, Ravita Sijo, Delicia Payne, and Marlene Lewis-Pettis, we welcome you all to our webinar. As a group, we have done the research and concluded that failure and its repercussions have had an ongoing impact on all of us in society. So as a result, today we will be exploring the understanding and navigating the experience of failure during adulthood. We hope that the information offered here can help you gain a better understanding of failure and apply it to your everyday lives. So before we begin, we would like to have a little icebreaker session. So we will introduce ourselves, we'll state our name and say one favorite activity that we like to do in our free time. So I can start. Again, my name is Jamelia Jackson. Hi, everyone. And I love eating Chinese food and watching a good show in my free time.
I'll go next. So hi everyone, my name is Ravita Seizure. In my free time, I enjoy watching new movies and series.
I'll go next. My name is Delicia Payne, and in my free time, I enjoy watching Asian dramas and reading.
Hi, my name is Marlene Lewis-Pettis, and in my free time, I like to look at house hunting on HGTV. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Sapita Maniram, and in my free time, I enjoy doing gardening.
Hi, my name is Rayanne, and in my free time, just like Jamelia, I love a good plate of food and a show.
Hello, my name is Doan Elliott, and I also love doing gardening in my free time.
Would anyone else like to share?
I believe we have 3 more participants.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura. And I like to read and watch new movies in my spare time.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessel, and I love to go to the park and play.
Was that everyone?
I believe there's one more person.
Hi, my name is Kate, and in my free time, I like to draw and do writing.
Thank you.
So it seems that a lot of us do enjoy doing the same things, which is great. That shows that a lot of our interests and experiences are relatable. So before we begin today's proceedings of our webinar, here's the list of objectives that we shall be covering. Just to note, our content is distinguished in 2 segments. The first focuses on the understanding of failure, where we shall be covering what is failure, what influences our perceptions of failure, how does failure impact our sense of self, our stages of failure, and the role of failure in the journey of success. This is followed by the second segment, where we shall delve in navigating the experience of failure through the objective of failure is an opportunity for learning, overcoming the fear of failure, discussion on motivation, managing our experience of failure, and learning from failed experiences. So to begin, we have to understand what is failure. So failure is the gap between an expected or desired result and what one ultimately experiences. Failure is influenced by the context or setting in which it occurs, and these experiences might be unique to each individual or culturally relatable. So what one person considers a failure, another may consider it to be a success story, and vice versa. So after failed experiences, we may tend to develop a fear of failure or fear of failing again. So fear of failure is the persistent and irrational anxiety about failing to measure up to the standards and goals set by oneself or others. This includes the feeling of anxiety over academic standing or losing a job or even losing self-space and self-esteem. So now that we have a basic understanding of the concept of failure and the fear of failure, I shall now ask you, the audience, what are some instances where you have experienced failure? So I can start. So for example, an instance of when I failed was when I applied for a job and did not get hired. So this made me feel disappointed with myself and my ability to achieve, because I kind of really wanted that position and I didn't get it.
I can relate with Jamelia in the same aspect of having a job or applying for a job, where I've been rejected a couple times. Well, especially when I am qualified for that position and was denied it. So the sentiment is shared.
Okay, I understand, yes. Does anyone else have any experiences of failure? It doesn't have to be anything big. It could be something small, like failing an exam or, you know.
Yes, I have some experiences with failure. Um, I remember a particular time when it is our well, I do accountancy, right? So what happened is that someone gave me a job to do, and I know theoretically it was about that, and I know how to do it theoretically. But when the person gave me and was explaining it to me, I was totally lost. And you know, you looked up to the person, and then you realized, you know, you're a disappointed person. And then now, by extension, you disappoint yourself. So you start thinking, well, you know, am I good enough? Should I stay into this profession? So yes, failure is real and has an effect on your how you feel about yourself. You know, you start to judge yourself and stuff.
Yeah.
I think my experience with failure was more emphasized in education, with exams and so forth, where you fail more than once. And of course, you continue to try and try again until you succeed. But I think that's one of the major areas to, especially when we try to evaluate ourselves.
Exactly, yes.
I personally relate to that. For example, like when you're working for a specific grade or to get within a specific range and you put in a lot of effort and time into what it is you're doing, whether it's an exam, an assignment, or even a project. And, you know, when it's submitted, you don't get what's expected or what you expect or you thought you would have gotten. And, you know, in those moments, I felt as though I was very unsuccessful. And, you know, briefly, I felt like a failure. And that did likewise to, I believe, Giselle, it took a toll on how I felt about myself and how worthy I felt in terms of, you know, my capabilities.
And from what I'm hearing, it seems that our educational achievements and career goals seems like some of the factors that contribute to us feeling like failures a lot. And society kind of pressures us to always achieve, and we tend to feel like failures are the slightest inconvenience in these different categories, especially. Does anyone have to share anything else before I proceed? Okay, so based on what we understand about failure and the fear of failure, we can say that one of the most prevalent negative emotions we can feel after failing is disappointment. So essentially, disappointing ourselves can make us question our ambitions, our self-worth, and our abilities. I'm sure many of you probably question yourselves about these things after a failed experience. So we become disappointed after repeated exposure to unfulfilled expectations, failed goals, and having a lack of coping methods that may jeopardize our mental and physical well-being. And this can lead to symptoms such as rage, sadness, disinterest, denial, and even fear. So we now have to ask ourselves what influences these perceptions or ideas and concepts of failure. Everyone makes mistakes and falls short from time to time. Our perceptions of failure determine how we react to and how we deal with failure. And these ideas of failure have been affected negatively by misguided beliefs, our attitudes, and even assumptions we make about ourselves and others. So some people may have a positive outlook of failure, and this might encourage them to continue on the path to achievement. It is seen in the workplace, even in films, books, movies, science fiction, everything, we see instances of failure and success everywhere we look. Everyone in these situations may encounter hardships, but how we deal with failure is determined by our perspective. So the distinction between success and failure is determined by mindset and influence. Successful people make the most of bad things that happen to them, whereas those who dwell on failure become trapped. So because of this, it is important to recognize what influences our understanding or concept of what it means to fail. So thus, here are some examples of what we determine to be failure. We have factor one, which is perfectionism. Perfectionism is often seen as a positive trait that increases our chances of success, but it can lead to self-defeating thoughts or behaviors that make it harder for us to achieve. This can even cause stress, anxiety, and even depression and greater mental health issues. Because perfectionism, some of us can equate failure to achieve our goals with a lack of personal worth or value, and we are more likely to make negative attributions about ourselves, and we can even have a tendency to blame mistakes on our own personal weakness. So essentially, in orienting our lives around avoiding mistakes, we can even miss opportunities to learn and grow from these failed experiences if we are fixated on being a perfectionist and perfectionism. Factor two, we have self-esteem. So self-esteem plays a role in how our perspective affects our outlook of failure or what we interpret failure to be. We have high and low self-esteem, and this concept oftentimes can be easily distinguished based on our response to failure. As such, negative reactions are more intense in people who have low self-esteem after a failed experience. So essentially, what is being said is that when our self-esteem is low, we become prone to overgeneralization, which is defined as a tendency to bring thoughts of personal inadequacy to mind and a decline in our sense of self-worth and belief in our capabilities to achieve. We have factor three, which is self-comparison. Ever so often, we can find ourselves comparing ourselves to others. Some of us may do this often. We do this in an attempt to make accurate evaluations of ourselves. The influence of the competitive world, where we see the world is really competitive now. I'm pretty sure a lot of you all noticed that. And this tends to influence our mindset and make us compare and contrast our lives with one another. We can do this every day, back and forth, comparing what we have to what others have. So while comparison can be a good thing, it can be a motivation, a valuable source for motivation and growth. It can also create a self-doubt, or it can lead to harsh criticisms when we feel as though we lack what others have. So for example, when I see my friend on social media get a new job or see a stranger showing off their success stories from the new house, car, and even their lifestyle, these things can be seen as motivation, right? But more than likely, we may feel like we are lacking these things in our own life, and we are more likely to feel like a failure for not having these same accomplishments. So as a result, this can lead to feeling threatened, resulting in envy, insecurity, and even jealousy when we don't have the things that we see others have and we want it. Then we move on to factor 4, which is societal pressures based on our sex and gender. We compete with one another in society to fulfill societal expectations to succeed, and we may believe it is necessary to feel safe, socially connected, and of worth. Many men and women deal with the repercussions of feeling like a failure as a result of the importance placed on accomplishments in, like we stated earlier, our educational pursuits, our career, and our personal lives. So for example, men feel like failures when their wife or spouse is dissatisfied with their income, when they're being compared to other men, and even fathers feel like failures when they are unable to provide for their children. So all the men in our seminar right now, we have to make a mental note and really think if this applies to you, if this example applies to you, if society really pressures you personally to achieve in these different areas or feel like a failure in these different areas. Then we have factor 5. There are even socio-cultural pressures that we face from dealing with norms and values. So culture influences the ethical behavior and our belief systems that the majority of us in society hold that can affect what is deemed a success or failure. The culture in which we live in has an impact on our norms and values surrounding failure, as well as what individuals believe is right and wrong, and how we should act when we fail to follow or align our lifestyle with these social norms and ideals. We may feel compelled to believe that we are failing to live up to the values that we are supposed to follow. So for example, in the Caribbean, many women have been deemed failures if they are not married at a certain age, or if they have children too early or no children at all. So those of us who are females and or women in the group chat and the seminar can make a mental note and really think if our social culture, our culture has really made us feel pressured to do these things or to achieve these things at a certain age. Then lastly, we have religious pressures. So oftentimes we can feel like a failure as a result of our religious beliefs. We may feel driven to overcompensate for our uncertainties of living a righteous life because we may tend to believe we are not living up to or completing our faith's commitments. This results in feeling like we are failing God. So many times we may feel like if we don't follow the 10 commandments, for example, we may feel like we failed God or that we are not following his path, which would then make us feel like a failure in his eyes. I have another question for y'all. So now that we understand different ways our concept of failure is influenced, what do you think might have influenced your concept of failure in your life? So to start, I can give an example. For me, I tend to compare myself a lot to others my age. Like I stated earlier, when I see others who achieve their degree already at a younger age, who has a like a big career, and they're younger than me or the same age, I tend to feel like, why can't I have that, or why don't I have that yet? So I kind of feel bad about myself for not having the same achievement as others, which even essentially makes me feel like a failure. So just to recap, we have perfectionism, self-esteem, self-comparison, sociocultural, and religious pressures. Does any of these align with your that will make you feel pressured to feel like a failure, or to make your or to change your or influence your concept of failure?
Well, I could talk about an experience I have. Now, as a man or as a young man, you often look for affirmation from other men.
Yeah.
And the lack of the affirmation sometimes make you feel you internalize it, and you feel you look at the failure as as an evil thing. I'm not good enough. I'm not man enough. And sometimes it's just simply a male figure, for instance, because I bring up male because I heard you talk about men. Sometimes it's just someone just saying, hey, it's okay. You could do it again, try again, you know? So affirmation is important. I think the lack of it made me perceive failure the way how I did.
What you said, what that stood out to me, was that sometimes men feel like they aren't man enough. And I think that's really important for men to understand that sometimes the pressures that they experience at the slightest thing, the slightest inconvenience can make them feel lesser than and feel like a failure, which is really important to understand. And I thank you for bringing up your example.
Welcome.
Does anyone else have anything else to share?
Yes, I can completely relate to the self-esteem and self-comparison concepts, mostly because when I look at, again, I use in your example, Jamelia, people within my age range, and I'm 23 years old, I'm still very young, but looking at people who already moving forward from a bachelor's into a master's, and then simultaneously they're juggling relationships and a really good job, and I'm just here like, what am I doing so wrong that I'm not there yet? Am I not in the right circle? Am I not doing enough? Am I just, what is it? You know, it's like a constant voice in my head every single day.
I relate to you 100%.
I think as a fellow young adult as well, that's something I relate to quite often, and we tend to see it we tend to be in that narrative of you know, everyone tends to be succeeding and progressing so quickly. It tends to really be pushed towards us quite a bit through social media. You know, even people that we don't know, we find ourselves comparing ourselves to them. We don't know them, we don't know their story, we don't know where they come from and where they are really, but besides what they put out there. And sometimes we use those things as something to compare ourselves to, and it causes us to feel lesser than, you know. So I think as a young adult, that's something a lot of us relate to. Anyone else?
Sure, I could contribute a little bit. When Jamelia said earlier on that based on your age, so as a Caribbean woman, a Trinidadian woman in my 30s, society expects you to be married, to have kids, to, you know, have your life going in a particular direction when it comes to family. And yes, when you see your friends and other family members succeeding in those areas of life, or I don't even think it's a matter of succeeding, it's a matter of just checking off a list. So I think what I'm trying to say is, it's not that you have to get married before you're 30 and have a successful marriage. It's just that you need to get married and have a kid.
Yeah,
because I have,
sorry for cutting you off.
right, and it's a constant reminder. You yourself would have insecurities as somebody in your 30s, as a female in your 30s, in our culture, you know, unmarried, and we're, you know, not having kids. But you don't only have your thoughts to battle with, you have your family's thoughts to battle with. So they'll always ask you, so when you're getting married, you're too picky. You know, you're not getting any younger. When you're going to pop out some children, like, if, you know. So I totally related to what you were speaking about, and in a lot of ways, in order to compensate for those shortcomings, I think in my younger years I would have pushed certain agendas when it came to academics, because I have a first degree already. So if I don't have a husband and children, at least I could say I have 2 degrees, or I have these amount of diplomas. You know what I mean? So it's almost as if I had to compensate. So when I was younger, it was failing at this meant I had to succeed at something else. And I think that's that's a mistake that a lot of us make in our younger years.
Yeah, it's like society has a list and it's like you need all of this for you to be deemed successful, and if you don't have it, then you're a failure automatically. And even then, as people, like what you said about your parents or your family might tell you when you're gonna get married, it's like generations are conditioned to stick with in this box of you have to do this or you're a failure. You have to be married at a certain age or you're a failure. And even in some families, they may continue on that path with that mindset. And it is important for us to kind of snap out of that when we realize it and don't follow what society expects us to do, in a sense.
Yeah.
It's also like a traditional time frame, if you think of it.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you all for your examples. They were really good. Okay. So now we move on to the effects of failure on an individual's sense of self. So self-concept is an individual's knowledge of who he or she is. According to an American psychologist, Carl Rogers, self-concept has 3 components, which are our self-image, self-esteem, and the ideal self. Self-image refers to how we see ourselves in terms of our physical appearance, social roles, and personality attributes. Self-image does not always correspond to reality. Some of us have a distorted view of one or more of our qualities, and these distorted perceptions can be beneficial or harmful to us. There are some negative effects of failure and self-image. For one, failure causes us to become more susceptible to comparing ourselves negatively. If we constantly fail, we may believe that we are not intelligent enough. We may believe we are ugly if we compare ourselves to social media, and we may believe we lack talent if we do not excel in areas we are interested in. And secondly, failure also warps the way we think about ourselves, resulting in a failure identity. So a failure identity is something where you find yourself saying things like, I can't, or I have to, I should or I should not, I must or must not, this can't be done, it's impossible. I'm pretty sure 1 or 2 of these has been found in our vocabulary at some point in time when we tried to do something or we wanted to do something and we were like, is this really for me? I don't think I should do this. I don't think this is for me. This is impossible. So yeah. Then we have our second factor, which is self-esteem. The value we place on ourselves is referred to as self-esteem. The way we evaluate ourselves determines our individual levels of self-esteem. These evaluations take into account both our own personal comparisons to others and their reactions to us. So when we compare ourselves to others and discover that we are better at something than they are, or that people like what we do, our self-esteem tends to raise. When we compare ourselves to others and discover we're not as successful in certain areas as they are, or what we would like to be, or when people react badly to things that we do, our self-esteem plummets. So there are negative effects of failure on our self-esteem. For one, after failure, some of us with low self-esteem may engage in negative self-talk or have low self-confidence, which makes it difficult to pursue new goals. Secondly, failure increases self-doubts about our own ability to achieve or succeed in life. So once we fail, it negatively affects our emotional well-being, and we are likely to assess our skills, intelligence, and even our capabilities incorrectly and see them as significantly weaker than they actually are. And thirdly, Some of us with low self-esteem are more troubled by failure, and we tend to over-exaggerate and over-analyze events as being negative and it's the worst thing ever. We feel like we're going to pass away, and we are more likely to experience social anxiety because of it, and we tend to have low self-confidence about achieving. Then our third factor is our ideal self. So our ideal self is the person we want to be. When we are placed on the earth, this is okay. We're gonna do everything to become this person. This is who we dream of, our dream person, the ideal person. So this person has the attributes or qualities we are either working towards or we want to possess. It's who we envision ourselves to be if we were exactly as we wanted. But, however, fear of failure can take a toll on that belief in our abilities and even our motivation to pursue goals. So there are negative effects of failure on our ideal self. For one, we develop or we experience poor motivation. So when we fear failure, we may also experience a lack of motivation that makes it difficult to get started on projects and work towards goals that aid in helping us become our ideal selves. So when something that seems too challenging or involves learning new skills, we may simply just refuse to do it. Like, we're not going to do it. That's neither here nor there, we're not doing it. Then we even self-sabotage, which is my second point. So self-sabotaging is when we set ourselves up for failure so we don't have to face the truth about whether we would have failed otherwise. A good example is when we have a huge night out before an important meeting, or when we say we have an exam tomorrow, but it's Friday evening and we want to go line with our friends before this exam. So we tend to sabotage with our own efforts. We tend to have an excuse to fall back on. We'll be like, we failed because we didn't have enough time to study. We just wanted to spend time with our friends before the exam. And then in a way, when we self-sabotage, this it protects our ego from taking the fall. So essentially, failing can trigger feelings of worthlessness. So in a sense, avoiding the experience in the first place of failing, we sometimes it protects us from disappointment, even regret and sadness. So those of you who, liming before an exam, just remember self-sabotage is something quite common in a lot of us, and I personally can see that I may do this sometimes, even, and it isn't healthy at all. Just give me 1 second, I'm so sorry. So I have another question, a final question. Can anyone give an example of how failure has affected either your self-image, self-esteem, or your ideal self? I can give an example to start. For me personally, I tend to experience poor motivation at times. I tend to always doubt myself about my abilities. So I do graphic design, and I may have an idea or a plan, and then I might see others who do really great work, and then I just feel like, okay, I can't achieve this. I don't think I need to do this right now. I'll do it next week. Sometimes we always tell ourselves, we'll do it next week, we'll do it tomorrow, we'll do it tomorrow. And it never gets done. We'll never accomplish if we continue saying, we'll do it tomorrow, we'll do it later, we'll do it at 12 o'clock, it's 12:01, we have to do it at 1 now. So yeah, that's my example. If you have any examples, feel free to share. How has failure affected either your self-image, self-esteem, or your ideal self?
For me, I'll have to go with ideal self. I could very much attest to self-sabotage, especially in networking situations where you meet people and you can behave yourself and behave civil and just be more interactive in that manner that you can actually you meet people and you say, okay, I'm going to be interactive, and then later on these people can be better at networking for your own benefit. And you see yourself saying silly things or doing silly things that makes you look strange in their eyes. In that manner, you tend to say, okay,
yeah, like let me fall back. I'm just gonna not bother.
Yes. I can attest to the self-sabotage.
Yeah, I feel you there.
I can
I think
also
for-
attest. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thanks. I think for me, you know, career-wise, you try something different, or you delve into a different field or area within your profession, and there's a learning curve, you know. And when you do things, especially if you have that tendency to want to be a perfectionist, when you do things that and you realize that you've made a mistake, or there's an error in your work, it makes you question, you know, your whole life. Like, should I have gotten into this field? Am I really good at what I do? Maybe I should think about getting into something else, because obviously this isn't working for me, you know? I'm actually going through a bit of that today. So this topic hits right on point, but I think my self-esteem has taken quite a blow with me delving into a different area within my field or within my profession. And on a personal front, I think I have a lot of responsibilities, familiar responsibilities at home. And when I am unable to keep on top of things, if I can't say about my mom the right way, or I can't please everybody, or get everything done that needs to get done, I often tend to feel, you know, inadequate.
Yeah.
Like
I'm
I haven't been doing my best.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it seems like if we feel like we're not doing well in one aspect of our life, everything else tends to crumble around us. We tend to this low self-esteem can, once we go low, we really go low in a way. So yeah, I totally understand. Like, I can relate as well. If I'm not mentally in the right frame of mind in one aspect of my life, it tends to show at home, especially. I feel in like a failure in a sense, where I'm unable to achieve, or I don't believe in myself, and I stay. It takes a while to get out of that low self-esteem mindset. So I understand and I relate.
Yeah.
Okay, so if no one else has any other examples to share, I now pass you on to my colleague, Ms. Louise Batiste, where she will be discussing the stages of failure.
Thank you, Camilla. Okay, well, there are 6 stages of failure. And the first stage is shock and surprise. This is where we did not expect this to happen to us. And I think we all can identify with this first stage. After which we have the denial stage, which is the second stage. This is where we blame outside circumstances for our failure. We don't want to believe we may be part of the reason for it. For example, we have failed a test and we might think, the lecturer didn't give us enough time to do the test. So we kind of throw the blame on outside circumstances instead of looking into ourselves and see where we may have gone wrong. The third stage is where we become like maybe experience anger and shift and blame. Again, this is where we throw that at the outside circumstances again. We blame the outside circumstances for everything that happened instead of actually, looking to see where we went wrong, or maybe what part we played in our own failure. The fourth stage is we may go through a depression period. This is the moment it all sinks in. It's no longer about who did what. We become emotionally worn out. So we no longer want to speak to our friends. We no longer want to socialize. We are very, how to put it, we are very caught up with the experience. The fifth stage is acceptance. This happens very slowly. This is where we come to terms with the fact that we also had a part to play in the cause of failure. And the last stage, which is the sixth stage, is where insight and change. We try to understand where we went wrong the first time, and we try to improve for future endeavors. So these are the 6 stages, suggested 6 stages. However, I would like to ask a question. Perhaps your stages of failure are different to that stated above. If so, how would you describe your personal stages of failure? And maybe I can start first. What I notice is that when I experience failure, I think I start with anger and shifting blame. Yeah. I remember doing our biopsychology course, and I didn't fail the test. However, I didn't get the marks that I wanted. And at first I got angry with the lecturer because number one, she gave you a very short time to do the test. And I also said that, so it was anger, and I shifted the blame to the lecturer. So I got angry at first because to me, she didn't give enough time. And I said that she was the cause for me not making the mark that I wanted. The other stage I observe about myself is acceptance. After some time, that is it. I slowly come to acceptance and reality. You know, maybe, you know, it's, let me look and see, you know, let me accept what has happened instead of blaming the lecturer or blaming someone else for what happened to me. So you'll find out how to accept the fact that I didn't make the mark that I wanted. And then I will go to the 6th stage, which is insight and change. That comes a while after as well, where I will actually sit down and analyze and see where I may have gone wrong. And then I will try to improve so that when I'm doing another test, I can get the mark that I want. So I pass through these 3 stages here: anger, shifting blame, acceptance, and insight and change. So I'd be very happy to hear your personal stages that you go through when you fail.
Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead. It's okay.
Okay, thank you. One thing that I typically experience after I fail at something is that whole anger and look to blame everything and everybody else around me, right? Is like, you didn't do what you're supposed to do. You didn't show up on time. This thing didn't work out. You know, when everything else just collides and collapses, just throw it on that, and I must be the perfect one in this situation, right? And then it after that, after my little crazy moment, it goes from the anger to straight denial. I have no idea what happens between anger and denial, but I jump straight into denial where, okay, I'm like, this situation just did not happen at all. It didn't exist. This happened in my mind, right? And then when I come back to the reality of things, after some long and hard thinking and dwelling on what happened, how I reacted, and everything about it, I come to and it depends on the situation, a depressive phase. Truthfully, sometimes it doesn't last very long. Sometimes it takes a few hands well to pull me out of it. And once I'm out of that depressive phase, then I can slowly enter into the acceptance phase. Not that I could pinpoint exactly one part of my life that I can share. It's just that these are the feelings that, how you explain that came immediately whenever I think of my past failures. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to share their experiences?
I like to think, for me, it's anger. But strange enough, the first thing I blame myself. I don't go to blame other people, and I'm angry at myself for letting it happen. Because sometimes failure, although it might be responsible, it might occur because of something someone else did. I'm more angry at myself as like, why didn't I stand up and say so and so and so? Why did I allow this? Why did so and so? And then I go from the blame of myself as to why I don't take responsibility, why da 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 da. Then I go into the depression. I'm not good enough. Why I didn't do this? Why I don't stand up? Why I don't be confident in myself? Why I don't, and the doubts and everything just goes back now with the depression. Eventually, after a lot of self-thought and self-analyzing and praying and all these things, I go to the acceptance, and then I go to the change. I say, okay, start over again, try a different route, get it done. Thank you.
Very interesting. Anyone else would like to share their experience?
Yes. I believe at first I'm in the first stage. I believe the first stage for me is denial because of the belief in my own capabilities. And then I believe I would accept my failure, and then I would aim to learn from it by insight and changing the behaviors that cause me to fail.
Oh, interesting. Okay, the floor is still open for maybe one more person. If you'd like to share.
Yeah, I like to share. Because I see a lot of persons talk about failure in this sequence, and for me, it really depends on my expectation of failure. Like for instance, if it is, I did not expect to fail, and I fail, I would be in denial. I said, no, that didn't happen, something wrong. They make a mistake. But if I were expecting to fail, and I fail, then I might get into a depression. Of course, the last stages would always be no acceptance, knowing that, okay, you are responsible, and then insight and change. But it really depends on if I'm expecting to fail or not. I don't know. That's my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your contribution. And I'm going to pass you on now to my colleague, Ms. Kerr.
Good night, everyone. So now we'll take a look at how failure is connected to success. But first, let's talk about success. Success is something you feel excited about when you've completed a task you've been working hard for. Like, yes, I won the game. But where exactly does this sense of success come from? Ever give it a thought? A sense of success comes only after you have tasted failure. We have witnessed many famous people like J.K. Rowling, the creator of Harry Potter. Her book was rejected 12 times. And Tyler Perry, who had a rough childhood, put all his savings into his first show and it failed miserably. We see them now as being successful. But had they given up after failing, we wouldn't know a school named Hogwarts or who Medea is. Without failure, how can we learn the correct way of doing things, whether it is from our own experiences or the failed experiences of others? Failure teaches us all the ways that did not work. It challenges us to find the ways in which they do. Failure also helps us to predict and avoid problems that may occur in similar situations. Only after we have failed can we appreciate all the work that went into achieving our goals. And this appreciation is what gives us that sense of success. For success is not a straight incline, but a step. And with each step of or new level of improvement, you'll hit a wall or obstacle and you'll want to quit. But don't give up. Start seeing failure as an opportunity to be embraced, analyzed, and picked apart, rather than something to run away from. Then you'll be able to see the changes that need to be made so that you can overcome challenges. So these are the steps to move closer to success. Step 1, persistence. When you feel enough is enough and you no longer want to be depressed and miserable, keep moving forward and continue to be positive. Step 2, self-determination. Don't back down and have the willingness to achieve your goal in spite of the barriers. Step 3, motivation. Admiration that comes within and from others serve as a milestone on the path to success. So remember who or what motivates you and keep moving forward in life. Step 4, visualization. It's a good practice to see yourself powerful and to visualize how far you've come and how far you will go. And last but not least, in order to move closer to success, you need to have an open mindset. Keep your thought process open to hardships and difficulties. Face them with confidence and learn from them instead of holding on to it. So that even if you fail after achieving your goal, the ability to learn from failure will still be there. The skill of persisting and being able to encourage yourself can only strengthen and challenge you to go further. And now I'll pass you on to my colleague, Ms. Cedar.
All right. So failure is an opportunity for learning. Since we've had a fundamental understanding of what is failure, such as what influences our perception of it, how it affects our self-concept, the various emotional stages triggered by it, and most significantly, the role it plays in our journey towards success, I believe it is time for us to now learn some tips and techniques on how we can effectively navigate the experience of failure in order to productively overcome it. So firstly, let's condition our minds to interpret failure not as an experience to be fearful of, but instead, one which we can holistically learn from. The first step to this is the acceptance that failure is an opportunity for learning. So let's have a look at this video which explains how and why this is.
Revita, I think the audio is off, so just double check.
Everyone wants to avoid failure, but despite our best efforts, it happens all the time. Failure can be difficult to accept, but it can also be an incredible learning opportunity. Years ago, I wrote my first novel, this science fiction tale of renewable energy and unrequited love, and it was absolutely terrible. Before I started, I had one goal: to create a quality piece of art. And when the final product fell short of this goal, I deemed it a total failure. But after some time passed, I realized I learned more about writing and storytelling from creating that horrible novel than anywhere else. That realization made me reconsider the value of failure. Now we need to make one thing clear. Failure itself is a drag, a bummer, an emotional kick in the gut. It'll leave you vulnerable and embarrassed, and you will probably encounter it at some point in your life. But failure does not mean you are stupid or worthless. It means you took a calculated risk, invested time and effort into something, and came up short. That's all. Failure can bring anyone down. I used to approach each creative project as if it was destined to be a timeless masterpiece. And when the result wasn't as good as I hoped, I'd sink into despair over my apparent lack of talent and vow to never leave the house again. But making myself feel bad got me nowhere. So if you fail, you can mourn for a while, but don't get comfortable in the sadness. If you're truly eager to improve, you'll need to figure out what went wrong. It's tough to admit when we've done something poorly, but in order to learn from failure, you have to be honest about the shortcomings in your work. The sooner you admit to these shortcomings, the sooner you can improve. After reflecting on my novel, I realized that my abilities needed work. So I read writing books to improve my storytelling, studied new subjects for inspiration, and practiced writing as often as possible. Eventually, I gathered the confidence to start a new project about a crazy goose. I told myself that I wouldn't mess up like last time. So I went out and tried and failed again. Understand that failure is not an end point, but merely a part of the self-improvement process. Although it's unpleasant, it's a chance to learn and gain experience. Even though my crazy goose story wasn't great, it was better than the novel. I continued to study and practice, and when I started another project about a wisecracking dinosaur, it turned out better than the goose story. I wasn't a best-selling author or anything, but there was a notable difference in my work. If I judge those projects by my original goal, then yes, they failed as pieces of art. But thanks to those experiences, I became a better writer. When I consider those silly stories from that perspective, they aren't failures at all. Whenever you're trying new things, you will almost certainly run into failure. But if you have an idea worth pursuing, pursue it to the best of your ability, even if it doesn't turn out the way you want, and learn all you can from the experience. Then try again and do better. Stay curious and open to self-improvement, and failure will always be temporary.
So, what have we learned from the video presented? Essentially, failure is not the endpoint, but merely a part of the self-improvement process. So while it is notable that failure causes quite a bit of emotional distress, it is highly important for us to acknowledge that through failure, we are pushed to learn and gain experiences, which in turn allows us to become better at achieving our goals and experiences. So our first area of concern is overcoming the fear of failure. Now, at the beginning of today's webinar, we came across the concept of fear of failure, which essentially is the fear of the possibility of failure occurring. This attitude is self-limiting, causing us to experience severe stress and anxiety, which in turn impairs our relationships and goals to succeed by hindering our sense of commitment and productivity towards them. Therefore, it is recognizable that the fear of failure in many instances tend to be the challenge that holds us back from progressing into better versions of ourselves. Hence, the reason it is important for us to learn how to overcome it. However, in order to learn about how the fear of failure can be navigated through, we must firstly understand the root cause or causes of our fear of failure, as well as grasp an awareness of the consequential behaviors that resultantly manifest in our lives. So our first question to address is, where does our fear of failure stem from? According to research done in concern to the phobia of fear of failure, the fear of failure is typically said to develop during childhood at a certain point of time in our life, when embarrassment, bullying, or trauma was experienced due to failing at something. Therefore, it can be said that our fear of failure ideally stems from three categories. Firstly, negative imprints from a childhood experience. For example, let's say when you were in primary school, you failed at an exam, and your teacher embarrassed you in front of your class because of it. This sort of memory can linger throughout adulthood and shape how you feel and perceive the possibility of failing, thus holding you back from committing to any situation that risks the outcome of success. Secondly, it can result from a traumatic experience where you felt socially humiliated. For example, being made fun of by your peers or mistakes you've made in public situations. This can discourage and demotivate you from pursuing tasks outside of your comfort zone. And thirdly, having an unstable sense of self. As previously discussed by my colleague Ms. Jackson, persons with a lower sense of self-esteem tend to be more perceptible to emotional adversity in the event of failure. This is because your self-perception is either fragile or depends on how others see you. You do all you can in your power to not risk feeling or looking like a failure. Thus, it can lead you to the fear of the potential outcome of failing. Now that we have a general understanding of the root causes of the fear of failure, it is equally beneficial for us to be aware of the physical and emotional symptoms that consequentially manifest in our lives. Therefore, here are some of the physical symptoms of the fear of failure. Firstly, insomnia or sleeplessness related to overthinking and severe anxiety. Secondly, stress-related pains. Thirdly, symptoms of panic, such as profuse sweating, splitting headaches, difficulty breathing, muscle tension, and digestive distress. And fourthly, feelings of constant fatigue and tiredness due to lack of motivation. Now, there is something to note. There is a connection between our mental state and our physiology. Hence the reason why in the event of fear of failure or in the experience of fear of failure, we also have physical symptoms. Additionally, there are also emotional symptoms. So the emotional symptoms of the fear of failure, which are symptoms I think a lot of us can relate to, are insecurities and excessive worrying about what will happen if we fail or make a mistake, procrastination to avoid work or tasks assigned that may trigger feelings of anxiety, unnecessary rationalization of how something can go wrong, and exaggerated feelings of worry, fear, panic when confronted with a risk or new task for which we may be unsure of the outcome. Typically, a lot of us tend to experience the emotional symptoms and we can easily relate to them. Usually, these symptoms are in relation to the fear of failure. That is, in the event of or before having actually failed. So since we have an understanding of the causes and the manifestations of the fear of failure, it is now important for us to learn how to navigate ourselves through the experience in order to overcome it. So here are some steps. Step 1, know your fears and understand why you are afraid. Do a little assessment on yourself and know the root cause of how you develop your fear of failure or what causes you to fear failing. For example, if you realize that your fear comes from a strong desire to want everything to be perfect, then shift your attention to how you can progress. Remember, progress, not perfection. Enjoy the process of improving at something and allow yourself to fail on the first or second try. Learn to be kind to yourself in the process. Step 2. Determine if your efforts are really working towards the direction of your goal. If you have behaviors like procrastination, identifying these self-sabotaging or destructive behaviors can help you change your mindset. In addition, you can learn how to respond to stressful situations. Step 3. Have a new perspective and redefine your concept of failure. So based on what you would have learned today, attempt to try to find a silver lining from your past failures and change them into lessons. Looking at failures as another life challenge to help you learn and not as a roadblock to your future is an effective way to overcome your fear. Step 4, face your fears. Repeated exposures to events that started the fear of failure can subside the anxiety. Permit yourself to fail. Examine your feelings and thoughts about failure. Expect the worst case scenario and believe that you will survive. The worst case scenario can happen and may be disastrous, but overcoming it is an achievement in itself and can and should be recognized as incredible growth. And finally, step 5, take control. Be the boss of your thoughts and the situation you're in. Take small steps. Your goal may be too far and too large to take head on, which would be setting yourself up for inevitable failure. Instead, you can try breaking that goal into smaller goals and take your time step by step towards the ultimate goal. By gradually implementing these steps into your life, you will be able to not only eventually conquer the fear of failure, but you will also be confident in allowing yourself the opportunity to grow and learn from your own experiences. As such, I shall now pass you over to my colleague Ms. Pear, who will be discussing with you the dynamics of motivation.
Thank you, Ms. Leader. So what does motivation have to do with success, you may ask? Through research, we have found that a key ability of successful people is in them knowing how to motivate themselves. The skill of having confidence in their own ability to start and finish tasks rigorously is what solidifies their chances at being successful overall. Motivation involves the biological, emotional, social, and cognitive forces that initiates, guides, and maintains goal-oriented behaviors. However, without confidence in your own ability, you will not be motivated to achieve your goal. There are two types of motivation. internal and external motivation. Internal motivation is determined by your own values and goals. This means that the motivation to accomplish your goal comes from within you. Internally motivated behavior brings a sense of satisfaction, fun, and enjoyment. External motivation is determined by external rewards or an avoidance of punishment. This means that the motivation to achieve your goal comes from a source outside yourself. In this case, you engage in behavior not because you enjoy it or find it appealing or satisfying, but in order to obtain something of value in return, such as money, power, or fame, or to avoid unpleasant consequences like paying taxes because you want to avoid a fine. While both types of motivation are effective, when pursuing your goals, you may grow tired and find yourself not wanting to continue the pursuit. This is called demotivation. Demotivation implies a lack of purpose, low self-esteem, and a lack of confidence, which guarantees you the necessary drive to commit yourself to improve your life or to carry out various types of activities, whether it is related to work, study, or any other aspect of your life. External causes of demotivation when others set goals for you. Carrying out these tasks is of no benefit to you other than to please the one who imposed them on you. Internal causes of demotivation works in tandem with external causes. When you set your goals yourself and there are too many external problems that arise, feelings of anger, frustration, and depression build up to a point where you want to quit. Now, in the experience of failure, we also come to the struggle of demotivation. However, as I previously mentioned, one of the key factors that support our motivation is our sense of confidence. Therefore, in order to rebound from our trials of demotivation, we are to focus on reassuring our confidence. As such, here are 3 tips that can help us boost our confidence.
When faced with a big challenge where potential failure seems to lurk at every corner, maybe you've heard this advice before. Be more confident. And most likely, this is what you think when you hear it. If only it were that simple. But what is confidence? Take the belief that you're valuable, worthwhile, and capable, also known as self-esteem. Add in the optimism that comes when you are certain of your abilities. And then empowered by these, act courageously to face a challenge head on. This is confidence. It turns thoughts into action. So where does confidence even come from? There are several factors that impact confidence. 1, what you're born with, such as your genes, which will impact things like the balance of neurochemicals in your brain. 2, how you're treated. This includes the social pressures of your environment. And 3, the part you have control over, the choices you make, the risks you take, and how you think about and respond to challenges and setbacks. It isn't possible to completely untangle these 3 factors, but the personal choices we make certainly play a major role in confidence development. So, by keeping in mind a few practical tips, we do actually have the power to cultivate our own confidence. Tip 1, a quick fix. There are a few tricks that can give you an immediate confidence boost in the short term. Picture your success when you're beginning a difficult task. Something as simple as listening to music with deep bass. It can promote feelings of power. You can even strike a powerful pose or give yourself a pep talk. Tip 2, believe in your ability to improve. If you're looking for a long-term change, consider the way you think about your abilities and talents. Do you think they are fixed at birth, or that they can be developed, like a muscle? These beliefs matter because they can influence how you act when you're faced with setbacks. If you have a fixed mindset, meaning that you think your talents are locked in place, you might give up, assuming you've discovered something you're not very good at. But if you have a growth mindset and think your abilities can improve, a challenge is an opportunity to learn and grow. Neuroscience supports the growth mindset. The connections in your brain do get stronger and grow with study and practice. It also turns out, on average, people who have a growth mindset are more successful, getting better grades, and doing better in the face of challenges. Tip 3, practice failure. Face it, you're going to fail sometimes. Everyone does. J.K. Rowling was rejected by 12 different publishers before one picked up Harry Potter. The Wright brothers built on history's failed attempts at flight, including some of their own, before designing a successful airplane. Studies show that those who fail regularly and keep trying anyway are better equipped to respond to challenges and setbacks in a constructive way. They learn how to try different strategies, ask others for advice, and persevere. So, think of a challenge you want to take on. Realize it's not going to be easy. Accept that you'll make mistakes, and be kind to yourself when you do. Give yourself a pep talk, stand up, and go for it. The excitement you'll feel knowing that whatever the result, you'll have gained greater knowledge and understanding. This is confidence.
So now that we understand how important confidence is when we face failure, how or what do you do to boost your confidence after an unsuccessful experience? So actually, I will start off first, right? So when I fail, usually what I would do is eat, avoid the situation maybe, and just watch movies. And what I would do is go by my family and they would give me pep talks to try again. And I would be reminded of my goal. And that is what will boost my confidence, my family and friends and those around me. Anyone else would like to share how they boost their confidence after a failed experience?
I can share a bit. So after a failed experience, well, I would feel, upset for a while and not do anything, but then eventually I would do something that I know for sure that I'm good at, so that it would boost my confidence and be like, if I could do this, I remember the time when I couldn't do this. So obviously I could build myself back up and try again at what I failed before. And that's it. But yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Personally, I relate to that as well. When I have an unsuccessful experience, to boost my confidence, I would engage in activities that I know I'm good at to sort of reassure myself, like, okay, you weren't good at this particular thing, but there are other things that you actually are good at. Anyone else?
Yes, in addition, I agree fully 100% with the both of you, because I do the same thing, but with the addition of, I typically think of who or what I'm doing this for. If not for myself, then typically it's my sister. And as ridiculous as this is gonna sound, because of my dog. Honestly, so in addition to reassuring myself of, like you said, if I can do this, then I can try again and get this down as well. But I'm just doing it with a specific person in mind. That also helps boost my confidence.
Thank you for sharing. Would anyone else like to see what they would do?
Hi, good night again. Well, I think failure is a good opportunity for you to boost your confidence. Well, what I mean, for you to apply or what I really want to say is for you to learn from what you from your experience. As the persons before said, I tend to do something similar to that. I tend to go to do something that I enjoy, something that I love, something that I'm good at. And it will help boost your confidence, so that you could go again and try this thing again. But like for me, like for instance, I will do like I might be creating a software for accounting. And every time I fail, I'm looking to fail to see what formula put in that is incorrect. So, it's a good it depends on the personality, I guess. It's a good opportunity to learn from where you fail so that it'll be better in the future. Yeah? All right.
Thank you all for sharing. Now, the maintenance or the rebuilding of confidence is significant in rebounding from consecutive failures. And just wanted to leave that note. So now I'll pass you back to Ms. Cedar.
Thank you. Right, so managing our experience of failure. Understanding how to manage ourselves through the experience of failure is quite significant, as despite the great opportunities of growth and progression failure brings to us, we aren't able to tap into these lessons or into those lessons before we effectively deal with our emotions and adapt strategies to the situations in order to make the most of it. But before I proceed, I wish to ask the members of the audience, can you share with us some mechanisms or manners by which you use to cope with your field experiences? I guess I'll start first. When I'm faced with an experience that I deem to be unsuccessful, I firstly take some time to reflect on the situation and my emotions. Then I seek out a close friend who I trust to share my thoughts and feelings. Sometimes immediately after a failed experience, I will do something unhealthy like binge eat unhealthy food to sort of distract myself and feel good. So based on that, how do you all, as in members of the audience, cope with unsuccessful experiences or experiences of failure?
For me, yes, the binge eating and binge watching of any show basically, just to get my mind distracted. But aside from that, typically my animals, my dog and my cats, they really do help soothe
the adversity of it. Yes.
Yeah, all of the burdens that I feel, all of the anger, all of the everything that is associated with after feeling at something.
Right.
Because the animals, they just innocent, they don't have any thoughts of their own, it's just instinct, so
Yes.
Knowing that innocence is literally right at my door waiting to cuddle and give pets and just
essentially, as much as you're there to comfort them, they're there to comfort you.
Yes. Yeah, basically.
And that is a very healthy mechanism to coping, actually. Anyone else?
I would say, to be honest, sometimes I just sit and cry and let out all that frustration and anxiety and everything that is built up.
Right.
With it after you have put so much work into something and then you just feel at it. So
right.
I would just sit down, have a good cry, pray about it, and then stop, go back again, analyze where it is I could have gone wrong, and constructively look and get areas that, okay, with this part probably needed changing or what, and get that part of it done and just start over.
But that is very healthy, to allow yourself to go through the emotions of frustration and anger and hate and all that. I don't know if y'all are seeing it in strategy 1, but it's a very healthy part of coping. It's the first stage. It's necessary for us to allow ourselves to go through that process, as opposed to holding it within ourselves and saying, oh no, that's not the case, I'm not angry, or it's too much, I shouldn't I shouldn't allow myself to go through that. That is not for me. It's good that you do that. Anyone else?
I mean, I cope with my failure. Sorry, excuse.
All right, anyone else?
No, sorry. Yes, sorry. What happened? I cope with my failure. What I tend to do when I fail, I look at as I said, I love to look at house design and stuff like that.
Right.
And I like to look at the station with house hunting. We're looking for an apartment. So if I was sitting in front of the television, I would look at that like for a few hours well and just fantasize, you know, like it was my house, you know.
I mean, those are very pleasant distractions, so I feel you on it.
Yeah.
Would anyone else like to share how they cope with unsuccessful experiences or experiences of failure? One more person.
Sure. I have, depending on the situation, I have a mixture of healthy and unhealthy.
Right.
I think I see under unhealthy that we have excessive sleeping. That sometimes comes, I assume, with depression, a little bit of depression. Healthy, as I think most of us would have said, you know, we might reach out to someone else. We might get built up, you know, somebody might remind us of all the good things that we have done or the things that we are good at. Look at the bright side or the silver lining. So yes, I do that a lot. I meet with my friends. Sometimes it's a mixture of both. I mean, I meet up with my friends, we have some drinks, not necessarily to get drunk, but it's a mixture depending on the situation and how severe the situation is.
Right.
Sometimes I could take just a little time for myself, a few hours, you know. I might be a little bummed out about it. By the time I play one or two little games on my phone or listen to some music, I'm cool. And then there are other times that it might last a little longer and I really and truly need my friends or my family to kind of poke the bear and push me out of whatever it is I'm feeling, you know.
Right.
But I think it depending on the situation, how severe the situation is, it could be a mixture of both.
What I think is important though is the fact that you're aware. You're aware that you're aware of the unhealthy attempts to reduce the pain as well as the healthy coping mechanisms. And there's a balance state. I think we all have a balance state, you know, and depending on, you're right, depending on the type of situation it is, sometimes depending on the severity of the situation or the expectancy of whether or not you might fail, the way we cope varies. It's never really just one way. Would anyone else like to share? All right. So with that being said, here are some strategic steps on how you can cope with the experience of failure. Now, as I just said, like there's a balance. So even though we know that there are some unhealthy attempts to reduce the pain, which we'll see in step 2, it's not entirely negative that you indulge in it sometimes, but having an awareness towards it is very much important. All right. So step 1. Allow yourself to experience your feelings. So as Savita would have mentioned, she would allow herself to sit and have a good cry. That is such an important step in terms of coping. Allowing yourself to feel your emotions is very important because those emotions are a normal part of our human process. Suppressing it makes it worse, makes the whole situation, the experience of it even worse. So whether it is you're feeling frustrated, angry, sad, upset, however you're feeling, allow yourself to sit and express it and embrace it in that moment so that, you know, you don't suppress it and hold it within yourself to later project it onto others. Step 2, recognize your problematic attempts at reducing your pain and supplement with healthy coping techniques. Now, while we say supplement with healthy coping techniques, as I just said, it's okay to sometimes indulge in the unhealthy attempts because let's be honest, those unhealthy attempts, they're very quickly, they you know, soothe us. They're very nice, they're very comforting, temporary remedies to reduce the pain. But there are also healthier options such as caring for yourself, engaging in a hobby, physical exercise, practicing mindfulness, and using relaxation techniques. So something that would fall under healthy, based on our audience, Ryan would have mentioned finding comfort in her pets. That would be considered something as a relaxation technique, or as a relaxation technique to reduce the pain a bit, the pain or the burden of the stress from failure. Right? Step 3. After reacting to your failure is acceptance. Understand that the voice in your head or the voice of another person, and recognize its significance in terms of learning. Try not to take evidence of failure too personally. Separate your self-identity with the failure itself, and realize that failure is not a reflection of your self-worth, but instead it is a process everyone has to go through in order to get better. The more you embrace it and think it's a good thing, the easier it is to accept failure and move closer to achieving success. Now, something about failure and experiencing failure is that we have to understand that because we've failed in a situation, or we've failed in different situations, it doesn't mean that we've failed at life entirely. So it is important for us to separate the experience or the experiences of failure from our self-identity, from who we are, in order to actually view it objectively and understand what can be done better. Step 4. Evaluate the occurrence by asking questions such as, why did this happen and what caused it? It is critical to determine why the experience is unsuccessful, as well as how your behaviors and techniques can be altered, or whether the situation should be taken in an entirely new direction. So a re-evaluation of the experience is very important in order to pull the lessons out of it so that it can be applied into future instances or experiences. And step 5. The final stage is to make a decision. Failure can be turned into an opportunity for progress by making a decision on the matter. So after having participated in step 4, where you pulled out the lessons that can be learned, you can then apply it into making a decision based on the matter. So whether you should continue going forward, continue pursuing, or perhaps you should look in an entirely new direction and move in that way. So prior to this webinar, we conducted a survey to gather a person's thoughts, perceptions, and challenges when it comes to the experience of failure. And one of the most notable concerns we recognized was that the majority of our respondents was staying resilient and overcoming the guilt and shame after having consecutive failures. So now we shall move on to managing failure and becoming resilient. To preface, resilience is a process and outcome of successfully adapting to challenging life experiences, especially through mental, emotional, and behavioral flexibility and adjustment to external and internal demands. Simply put, it is the ability to bounce back from life's inevitable disappointments, failures, and pains. However, when we are constantly faced with unsuccessful circumstances and instances where we feel as though we're against the wall, when it comes to progressing and prospering in life, our inner strength and resilience may suffer. Furthermore, weakening our sense of drive and ability to commit to new situations and goals. So here are some steps on how you can improve or boost your resilience in the experience of feeling as though you are consecutively unsuccessful. Step 1. Assess your situation with objectivity. Understand the actual severity of the situation. Consider whether you may have overstated or overestimated the detriment of it. A lot of the times, the perceived adversity of our situations tend to be amplified by evoking a painful childhood issue. So consider the causes and setbacks of the situation objectively. Step 2. Focus on the positives. Compare your undeserved bad things with all of the good things that have happened to you, which may have seemed to be unearned. A lot of the time, when you do this, you realize that your unearned good things far outweigh the undeserved bad that has happened. Step 3. Build your support network. Whether it's friends, family, or colleagues, it is important for us to have someone in our corner who can reaffirm our capabilities. Step 4. Look after yourself. It will help you to refocus, making you feel more confident and in control of your circumstances. Even if it is temporary, a lot can be done during that period. And step 5, know your limits. When you take too many things to do all at once, we're setting ourselves up for failure because we are setting ourselves up for to be anxious and to feel overwhelmed when it comes to coping. Additionally, when it comes to the subsequent emotions of guilt and shame after having consecutively failed or having a majority of unsuccessful events happen all at once, the act of forgiving ourselves is necessary to move past the feelings. Though we have no influence over whether or not another person will forgive us for failing to meet an expectation or goal, we do have control over whether or not we will forgive ourselves. Furthermore, it is unhealthy not to forgive yourself for being imperfect. So take the risk to fail forward, because within every failed experience, there are multiple lessons that can be learned and applied in future efforts. With that being said, I shall now hand you over to my colleague, Ms. Louise Batiste.
Thank you, Rita. Okay. Well, we're going to move on to our other point, which is very important, and that is learning from failed experience. And we need to bear in mind that our mindset is a key attitude when it comes to coping with consecutive failure. And in this video, is going to explain the two mindsets and which one we are supposed to develop in order for us to learn from our mishaps whenever we fail. So the video is going to play now.
Here are two seeds, both planted on the same day, in the same soil, in the same garden bed. One is very curious, full of life, and ready to grow as tall as it can. The other is filled with fear. What if the sun is too strong and burns my leaves once I grow, it thinks. Or what if a beast eats my tender sprouts? No way, not a chance I am leaving my shell. So, it remains still and stagnant, rigid in its place. The brave seed feels the heat of the sun above and starts to push hard out of its shell. Sure, it has doubts about reaching the outside world, but its curiosity is stronger than anything. I want to see all the living creatures of this garden, it thinks. I can't wait to feel the morning dewdrops on my leaves. The little seed keeps pushing until a single sprout comes out. It grows and grows through sunny, warm days. It even grows through colder, stormy days, because the brave seed knows that the sun will always return. Throughout life, you will have moments when you feel like either one of these seeds. The way we see the world around us and how we behave towards life is called our mindset. You can choose to have a fixed mindset or to have a growth mindset. When you have a fixed mindset, things can seem too hard. Negative thoughts might cloud your mind and you start to give up easily. I can't do this. You may believe that if you are not good at something, then you never will be. I'm just born this way. The obstacles you face can hold you back, and you begin avoiding challenges. What's the point of trying? Just like the fearful seed. However, you can always choose to have a growth mindset. A growth mindset helps you believe that your goals are within reach with effort and perseverance. Life is a great big adventure. It shows you that failure is a normal part of your journey. The obstacles you encounter will only make you stronger. Challenges and mistakes help me learn. You'll enjoy the challenges you face and become more resilient. I want to become my best self, just like the brave seed. Fear is a natural emotion. We all experience it, and it can make changing your mindset difficult. The important thing is to try. So here are some tips to switch on your growth mindset. Perfection does not exist. Aiming for perfection is like running a race without a finishing line. Trying to achieve it will only exhaust you. When negative thoughts fill your head, you can turn them around by simply adding "yet" at the end. See challenges as adventures. They will make you more resilient and can open new worlds. If you work hard, you will see progress. And don't worry about mistakes. They are a part of life, and we can learn from them. The good news is, the sun always comes out after a storm. By having a growth mindset, you might even find that a little rain won't bother you much at all.
Okay. So as we see from the video, how very important our mindset is, right? And as it said here, instead of fixed mindset refers to your belief of intelligence, talent, and other qualities are innate and unchangeable. However, a growth mindset refers to your belief that intelligence and talent can be developed with practice and effort. Okay, and this is having a growth mindset, right? It's very important. However, according to research, it says that everyone is a mixture of both growth and fixed mindsets, right? However, if we would like to learn from our failed experiences, we will have to develop our growth mindset. Okay? Because as I said before, the growth mindset has to do with resilience. Has to do with if I try again, I will succeed. And if we move on to the other slide, we will see other points that will enable us to develop our growth mindset. And the first point is view challenges as opportunities. Okay? Instead of seeing challenges as headache, view them as an opportunity instead. Okay? The second point is prioritize learning over seeking approval. Okay? When we are mainly concerned about other people's approval, we miss out on many opportunities to grow. So stop worrying about what other people think of us, right? And push forward and see the benefits after we fail. The third point is focus on the process instead of the end result. Okay? People who have a growth mindset also have a willingness to learn. It is good to have goals, but one of the keys to success is to learn valuable lessons. The fourth point is choose learning well over learning fast. And we know we are living in a very fast world, right? However, it is not very healthy in terms of helping us learn from our mishaps when we fail. Okay? So learning something, learning should not be something that can be rushed. Okay? You should be willing to make mistakes and experience challenges. Okay? So instead of choosing learning fast, you should choose learning well instead. Because in that way, when we make mistakes, it wouldn't hurt us that much. Fifth point, making mistakes does not make you a failure. You're not a failure if you need to improve on something. Making a mistake simply means you are on the right track. You are just not there yet. And that's encouraging, okay? So whenever we make a mistake, we are not a failure. It's just that maybe we need to do a little more work, a little more studies and so forth. And the last point is learn from the mistakes of others, okay? I mean, we should not compare ourselves to other people, okay? However, we should keep the mistake that they made for future reference, right? So when we are in that position, we can apply certain principles so that we will not make the same mistake that they made, okay? And these are some points on how we can drift from a fixed mindset into a growth mindset. So whenever we fail, we won't give up, but we will learn from it, okay? And I would like to ask you a question. Which tool do you encounter the most difficulty with? Meaning that, based on what I just read, in terms of the points, which points do you find it's very difficult to apply in your experience when you fail?
I think for me, definitely would be the prioritizing learning over seeking approval, because for whatever reason, typically I tend to seek that validation and approval from anyone who is involved in a task, especially people who would have completed it prior to me, rather than taking my time and learning the ins and the outs, the do's and the don'ts, and being able to understand what is happening fully. That is what I do typically, and that is what I don't know, hinders my mindset from going into a growth.
With you on that, because we grew up like that, seeking approval from our parents. So it's something that is kind of built in us. It's not innate, but it's there. So it's like, so I can understand what you are saying. Anyone else would like to give their viewpoint?
For me personally, I find focusing on the process as opposed to the end result to be the most challenging at times, because a lot of times I kind of just want to get to the point and get to the point well enough, as opposed to going through all the trials and tribulations of the process itself.
I think my own is the first one where you view challenges as opportunities. I mean, to me, I find that very hard to do. Not even at first, at all, So number one is my point of difficulty. Anyone else would like to share?
To be honest, I think I have problems with 1 to 5.
Okay.
I don't think I can pick one that I have the most difficulty with. I can tell you for 6, that's the easiest for me. Learning from the mistakes of others, yes, but there is a natural progression from 1 to 5 for me. I don't think I could choose one.
Okay, interesting. Anyone else before I pass on the information to my other colleagues?
For me, I would have to say number 3, like someone said earlier, which is focusing on the process instead of the end results. I tend to have a lot of problems with that because I'm always imagining what it would be like at the end, and then I kind of like rush the ins and out before I reach there, and then that kind of would add to why like the end result wouldn't be as satisfying if I knew I didn't do it as thoroughly as I could have.
Very interesting indeed. Okay, so is there anyone else who'd like to share before I move forward? Okay, thank you very much for your contributions, and I'll pass you now to my colleague, Jamila.
So we have now come to the end of our webinar. You all have been a great audience thus far. We enjoyed all the feedback that you gave us. On behalf of my group members and myself, I thank you so much for taking the time out of your hectic days to come here. We know we went over, might have been a long seminar, but we do hope you enjoyed it, and we hope that you'll be able to apply what you learned in your personal lives. You can even feel free to share it to your friends, your families, your children. You know, they may be young and they too will be experiencing failure. And it's good to, you know, let them know that, you know, failure, though it might be inevitable, it's not the end of the world. And it's good to even remind ourselves, even our grandparents, those are older than us, those are on different paths than us, to understand and to completely understand and what failure really is and what it entails. It isn't the end of the world. Failure, it shouldn't be seen as a bad thing, though it might have its negative aspects. But we need to fail to learn, essentially. So I would just like to leave you all with a quote to end. By Russell Brand: being willing to let go of the idea that I know absolutely what's best for me. So we might often think that we know all our wants and needs, but perhaps maybe we don't. Maybe we need to let go of the idea that we as individuals know absolutely what's best for us. So we have to release ourselves from that perception that shifts our mindset into a more teachable frame. So this which will in turn allow us to experience failure that would shift us to redirect our mindset, the way we perceive things, the way we react after a failed experience, essentially, to better ourselves, to essentially become a better version of ourselves. Since failure being presented in our lives will allow us to learn and grow into the person we are intended to be. So I thank you again for being a great audience. I enjoyed